Good morning, everyone. I'm Ryan McGahey. I work for RadioWorks, and I'm here today on behalf of the Ford Worthington Governmental Affairs Committee, and we're pleased to host this legislative coffee event here at the Fire Hall. Joe Schumacher, District 21A representative, unfortunately could not be here this morning. We do have Marge Fogelman, our District 21B representative from Fulda, Minnesota, and I believe we are waiting on Bill Weber. He had said that he was going to be here, and I guess he's running a little bit late. Bill, of course, has been our District 21 senator for several years now. The format, well, right now with just Marge here, it's not going to be much of a format. I'll probably just give her a couple of questions here that we've come in so far, and Marge can address them. Actually, first, before we get to questions, Marge, why don't you just maybe give us a brief overview / introduction of what you've seen in sessions so far. Just kind of introduce yourself to the crowd.
Well, thank you everyone for being here today. It's a nice day, actually, and we had a really nice winter, so we'll just keep going with that. I appreciate everyone being involved and paying attention to what's going on, because that's really important, I think, going forward for Minnesota. In my opinion, last session was marked by government overreach, and this session we are unfortunately seeing more of the same. We spent an $18 billion surplus last year with Democrat leadership and raised taxes by another $10 million. These decisions led to a budget deficit projection for our next budget cycle, unfortunately. Despite this news, once again, they have decided to spend more of your money, agreeing to spend at least $500 million before session ends again. Instead of using caution, they continue to spend, and this only worsens our financial problems in the future. Many have noticed the attack on our religious freedoms. A purposeful change made by the majority in the Minnesota Human Rights Act no longer ensures religious organizations and faith-based schools can hire teachers and ministers that are consistent with their mission and values. The Second Amendment is also being targeted. Amazingly, the majority is looking to decrease penalties for criminals and eliminate laws for those who commit crimes with a gun, while at the same time seeking new laws that penalize law-abiding gun owners. And this does nothing to curb violent crimes. I would expect a capital investment bill to be approved this year. This is a proposal that borrows money at lower interest rates to help construct projects in statewide significance. We did have a large capital investment plan last year, but the majority is expected to bring a new proposal this year. That's just a few of the notable provisions we tackled at the Capitol this year, and I'm sure you may have questions on these or other items, so I will do my best to answer any questions that you may have.
And I'm reviewing some questions right now. Looks like we have 4 of them turned in to this point, and if anyone, of course, has a question, they can either just bring it forward and set it on the side of the desk. Jamie was around here somewhere. I think he's outside looking for Bill. So one way or the other, we'll get the questions up front and we'll get them asked. First one I'm going to ask here, and these are in no particular order. Well, there's Senator Weber.
Good morning.
Actually, so before we ask questions, Bill, you ready?
Sure.
Okay, we're just going to have Bill kind of give his quote-unquote opening statement, talk a little bit about what he's seen at the legislature thus far.
Well, thank you. I apologize for being late. My wife and secretary always tell me you should never sit at the office and get a couple things done before you take off. And since they're not in the room, I will say they're right. But anyway, thank you for the invitation to be here. And I bring you also greetings from Representative Schumacher. Joe was tied up as the lead on HHS committee hearings all day yesterday and is not making it back to the district this weekend, so that is the reason he can't be here. As far as what's happening, we are in that time of the year where the omnibus bills are coming to the floor. We dealt with policy bills the last 2 weeks. We'll be starting to deal with finance bills in the week ahead. And obviously, the majority doesn't have as much money to play with this year. As a result, number one, we had our budget year last year. This year, it would be a situation of filling in gaps and correcting problems. They have not corrected all the problems that were created last year, unfortunately, but we continue to see efforts made to put more mandates, whether it's on schools or local units of government. It really doesn't seem to matter these days. They intend to try to control everything at this point. Right now, serving on the tax committee, our target this year is $53 million, so there's not a lot that can be done with that. Judiciary has the same kind of target. I'm not sure where the other budgets are. We had the education policy bill in front of us here a week before last, and which I voted against because there again, our school districts keep telling us, stop the mandates, but they just can't help themselves. And so, you know, some of the new ones out there, school boards have no control over the books in the library. That's up to the librarian. They or the parents can't say anything about it. And, you know, if they have a school newspaper, you know, they have no control over that. If they decide to go off the deep end, and what have you, that's what they're allowed to do. As a result, what you're going to see happening is school newspapers will become a thing of the past. And I don't think that was their overall intent, but that's going to be the net result. But with that, you know, we'll just get started with the questions.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Weber. We've got 4 questions that have been submitted now that Jamie's back in the room. He had been, of course, outside waiting for Senator Weber to intercept him. We will have anyone who wants to ask a question give it to Jamie, and then Jamie will make sure I get it. That saves you the awkwardness of having to come up here in front of everybody and drop off a question. What I'll do is I'll ask a question, and some of these, of course, are going to be maybe just House specific or maybe just Senate specific at this point, and some of them just may be something that one of you can answer, and the other one can just say, well, I don't know, or there's nothing I have to add to that, I guess is probably a better way of saying that. So why don't I just start, and I think what I'll do is I'll just kind of maybe trust you guys to answer it in the best way you can. There's only 2 of you up here, so it's not like you're going to be fighting for control of the mic, so to speak. Let's talk about, and here come 2 more. Ranked choice voting is something that I've been asked about here. Only 2 states have it. And does it have a chance of passing in this session? And I guess Secretary Steve Simon is not in favor of it statewide. So why would, what's the status of ranked choice voting? And whoever wants to answer that first, just go for it.
Well, we just passed the elections policy bill, and there wasn't anything about ranked choice voting in that. What Minnesota is signed on to right now is the national popular vote, and there has to be so many states signed on to that to make it pass nationwide. But ranked choice voting I don't think is good. There was a lot of things that weren't good in the elections bill right now. We tried to amend it to have back to just voting day instead of voting season, if that's what you want to call it. And they did not want just one day for voting, and it's just, they want it, it's basically, we want the Democrats to win bill is kind of how you could look at it. But nothing about ranked choice voting in the bill that we just passed.
Right. I don't see anything coming through the Senate. I don't serve on those committees, and we haven't dealt with the elections bill yet in the Senate. But I don't think, in Minnesota, let's face it, if you have ranked choice voting, this is what you're going to wind up. In the metro area, or particularly the Twin Cities, every election will be only Democrats on the ballot. Out here, it'll be only Republicans on the ballot. That's the way it's been breaking down, and they just that does not lead to fair elections and give the people an opportunity to have a voice. So
Here's another election related question, I guess. Is there any hope that Zuckerbucks or outside money could be banned in Minnesota as 28 other states have? I haven't heard the term Zuckerbucks, but I certainly know what that is in reference to.
That was also something that was in the elections bill, that they were trying to stop some of that outside influence. That was an amendment onto the bill, and that also did not pass.
Is there a bill to introduce new taxation on school bonds and referendums? Is a question I have.
new taxation on school bonds and referendums. The only thing that I can think that is in reference to is currently, right now, in a construction bond, the state picks up 70% of the cost of a construction bond for a school district. At this point, I have seen no legislation to increase that percentage. And when I say 70%, that was the ag to school credit. It would be 70% of the cost of the bond on agricultural property. And I've had groups come in and say, can't we raise that to 100? And my question to them always is, and so what do you expect me to say to the commercial taxpayers who, number one, provide your services and sell you products and what have you, when they have to pay the entire cost of it on their property? And so I have not seen anything regarding that issue this year, and I know nothing as far as any other type of tax on that.
Okay, and neither do you. Okay. There actually is a second part to this question. Can you vote in an election when you pay taxes in one district but live in another?
Okay. That has been a common criticism of, quite frankly, school bond issues. You might have a property owner who lives outside of the district who really does not get anything to say as it relates to the to a bond issue that's going to add to their real estate tax. And at this point, there is no means by which an absentee property owner can vote in such an election.
Let's go a little more general now, and we'll let Representative Fogelman maybe start with this one. Is there any significant legislation on the way regarding child care regulations and or funding?
I know that is a huge concern. It's not just in Worthington, but it's across the state with the child care and how expensive it is. And unfortunately, with the school having the all-day preschool, it's really hurting our local daycares. And nothing is changing right now with funding or anything that I'm aware of at this time.
You, Senator?
No, I have not seen any bills relating to that issue. You know, what Representative Fogelman said is correct. Part of the issue within our daycare situation, whether it's in-home, whether it's a center-based daycare, the infants are basically a group of clients on which daycare makes no money. The cost, because number one, you can have the number ratio to staff to child is so great, and the other costs associated with it are so great that you really don't make any money there. Where you make money is in the 3 and 4-year-olds. That sort of offsets the losses that you incur on the infant end of it, and more of them are winding up not having the need of daycare because, as you mentioned, of the programs being offered in the schools, and also at the end of the day, if a daycare is full, they can't bring those students in for after-school situations because then they exceed the numbers that they're allowed. So it's sort of a self-perpetuating problem that the state has created, in my opinion. And so we don't see any legislation this year, and quite frankly, with the current crowd that's in control, we won't see any improvement in that situation.
Oh, yeah, I'll allow it. I've always wanted to say that.
First State Bank, I'm the CEO of First State Bank Southwest. We finance those private daycares. It's killing them.
Yeah.
We have seen just in the last 3 years here in Worthington, because the licensing requirements for those daycares just keep ratcheting upward. And now they're competing against our government dollars again. And unfortunately, we're gonna find ourselves with no private daycare, and it's all gonna be funded by the government in the future if we don't somehow reverse this.
No, I remember back when my first term, I served on E12 Education, and the chair came, we were in the minority then too, and the chair came in and he had this grand plan for preschool within the school system, and he asked what I thought, and I said, well, Mr. Chairman, at this point, you've just wrecked preschool development in my community. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, there are 2 programs for daycare right now. One is operated within the school, and one is operated within a church. And I said, my school doesn't have space for any more, and if you provide all these benefits to the school-driven program, the church will not be able to compete, and they'll be out of it, and there will be a group of people that do not have preschool opportunities. And so at that point, he switched it and made monies available to everybody to do it. I don't think there's that kind of understanding left up there.
A question that just came up, and I guess I'll ask this one now since it's somewhat related. How are public school preschools financed?
Your tax dollars.
Thank you to all of us sitting here.
Figured that was an easy one to answer. Is the legislature doing anything now, or have they done anything recently to change residency establishment guidelines? That's what the question says. And
That's regarding, I heard this regarding to squatter issues. They've changed if a person lives in a domicile for more than 4 days, they now establish residency, and you can't remove them.
Thank you, Paul. I couldn't figure out what this first word was, and okay.
Nothing that's been addressed that I'm aware of.
We had a bill up in front of us earlier in the week that was dealing with, trying to remember which bill it was. Anyway, we had an amendment that would have said that if a squatter, or if a community allowed squatters to take over, and I don't remember all the details at this point because I was working on another bill at that time, that the community would lose their LGA. And, but, you know, and obviously that didn't go through. And we keep hearing lip service. They had said, well, you know, we agree we shouldn't be allowing property rights to be taken over by squatters at this point in time. But there's the majority isn't going to do anything about it.
Is there any progress on deleting tax on Social Security? Is this question?
Well, there was a large number of the population that did have a reduction in their, in the amount of Social Security on which they're taxed. And that, I should know, being on the tax committee, but off the top of my head, I want to say, like, if it was a single individual, it's if your income level is at 75,000, and if you're married, it's 100 and, not double, but 100 and some $1,000. And then there's a formula out there by which, as you go higher, the amount of the reduction is reduced. And I know that I've talked to a few people who have seen some benefit from that, certainly. But there's nothing out there this year that will exclude all Social Security income from tax, because basically being a non-budget year, the targets are so small that's, and the cost of doing that is so big. If I remember right, to have totally eliminated it last year, I think the cost was between $700 and $800 million, and that's what the state was taking in from income tax on Social Security benefits. Now that has been reduced, but they're not going to go ahead and reduce and take it away from the rest of it.
What are your thoughts on first issue, gambling expansion online?
I'm not, gambling's been going on forever and it's not going to stop. I don't know what the gambling expansion online would be.
That means there are apps that you can have on your
Right.
phone, on your computer, that allows you to participate in the process, and out there right now. And there are those who feel that having it, okay, I can take out my phone and I can go ahead and I can make my bets and what have you, will increase greatly the addiction problems with gambling.
You're already addicted to your phone enough, people.
Yeah, I know it. And actually, did you hear this morning on the news they were talking about there's a psychologist who is recommending that children have only a flip phone until they're freshmen in school. Just because of the problems that the smartphone is creating for them, but as well as for adults. But that is an issue that's out there, and right now the bill for legalizing gambling is not there yet. They're still working on it, and I'm guessing we will see something come through.
Part two, I guess, a different position or a second issue, positions on end-of-life choice for terminal illness.
That's the comfort care bill. Basically, I think it's a slippery slope to decide for somebody to say when they want to end their life. As a Christian, my view on that is God is in control of my life from conception to death, and that is how I will maintain my stance. I don't want to see anybody suffering. I don't like it. But I just don't think that it should be legislated for people to allow that to happen.
In the Senate, there have been enough senators from the majority that have said they do not support assisted suicide. And as long as they remain on that position, that bill will not come forward at this point. So with only a one-seat majority in the Senate, they aren't going to go through the embarrassment of having the bill defeated. So
I'll ask both of you this question. What are your thoughts on the multiple bills dictating staffing for hospitals and the legislation introduced allowing nurses to refuse patient assignments? I even have numbers here. House File 4200, yep, and Senate File 4444.
I actually just was meeting with a hospital about their concerns on this. Basically, if they had only somebody working and they needed each nurse to have so many patients and they decided not to, then there they sit with nobody to care for these patients and trying to find somebody. It's nothing that, it should be local control. The hospitals know what they need and how to staff them, and I don't think it should be it shouldn't be coming from the legislation. I think it's a lot with the nursing unions, I'm guessing. So that's who's pushing it, and it's really taking away care from the patient, and that's not a good thing. And nobody at the hospital from administration to the nurses thought that was a good idea. So I don't know why it's going forward. I don't know if you talked to anybody about that bill or not.
I haven't talked to recently, and I don't serve on the HHS committee, but yes, I mean, that's an issue that has come up frequently over the years, and let's face it, out here, our hospitals, number one, struggle to find enough staff in the first place. And then if the states, in their lack of wisdom, people always ask me what I think about artificial intelligence. I said I'm all for it because there's such a shortage of natural intelligence. but the reality of it is that you cannot have a specified number out there that there has to be this many staff, because number one, some of our hospitals don't have that amount of staff to even bring in to cover, and number two, now there are certain situations, I know that there are certain patients that have created issues of safety for our nurses, and those are things that need to be dealt with. But there again, our local hospitals need to have the tools available for them to deal with those kind of issues. And also part of the problem is we see oftentimes mental health issues are being forced onto our local law enforcement and our local hospitals, neither of which have been trained or have the means with which to deal with it. And quite frankly, that's a failure of the state of Minnesota. And that failure leads back to the time that they closed the facilities that were available in Minnesota. I'm not saying there weren't some changes that needed to be made, but eliminating those facilities has created a serious mental health crisis across the state of Minnesota. And until people are willing to stand up, admit that, and deal with that, we're going to keep facing these kind of issues, whether it's a police officer having to sit outside a room or whatever, the number of different things that problems that I hear. It's going to be continue to be an issue.
And I think that bill, it wants you to have somebody on staff 24 hours a day for mental health issues, not even that you'd necessarily need them there every day, but you would have to pay for them to be there, somebody 24 hours a day. So if they're just sitting there all day, and what's that going to do to your health care costs? I mean, it's already expensive now. The hospitals can't. They said they wouldn't be able to sustain paying somebody to do that and sit there. So it's not a good thing. Nothing. I haven't heard any more about the bill, so I will watch that and let you know.
The next question has to do with cannabis. What are you doing to reduce the effects of cannabis, or what steps do you feel our community needs to do to reduce the effects of cannabis? Now, I assume they mean
With the
the effects of the
legalization.
legislation. Yeah, the legalization.
The effects of the legislation I know of is that it's just a mess, and they had no guardrails on it, and the police don't really know how to handle it. The schools are having difficulty with it, and nothing is really getting addressed to make it any better. I know there are some changes coming forward, and I'm actually not aware of what the changes are that the original bill writer is making.
No, I think that's true. This is a prime example of a piece of legislation that, as they are fond of saying, was not ready for prime time. They ignored the problems, thinking that they could deal with them as they came up, and our local, whether it's law enforcement or local government at every level, really doesn't know what to do because there is no true guidance from the state as to how these things can or have to work. You know, back when this bill was being discussed last session, and I live in Rock County, and our county administrator was told from an individual from Colorado who legalized marijuana a number of years ago. He said, with their location, and of course, Rock County only has to have one licensed outlet. I mean, the state went so far as to say how many licensed outlets there has to be out here. I assume with the Nobles County population, you're probably looking at 3 or so. 2? Okay. He said with Rock County's location on the interstate and the first county in to the state from the west on the interstate and the first county in from Iowa, neither state of which it's legal, they expected that it would be a $20 million a month business. Now, number one, local government gets to keep very little of the tax that's being created to help pay for all the costs that are going to come about as a result of it, whether it's law enforcement, HHS costs, what have you. But the state is not prepared to deal with this issue. I'm sorry. Well, the first appointee of the governor had to give up her appointment because she had broken the law already. And so it's I don't know. I haven't seen what they're proposing as far as changes. I think at the end of the day,
It'll be minimal.
It'll be minimal. That's right. And remember this. The first priority for people to get licenses are those that are previously convicted of drug penalties.
When you said $20 million, I was like, what are you smoking? But I digress. What is happening with the EMS bill, emergency management? Is that what that is?
Yes.
Okay, emergency management.
Well,
Thank you. Emergency medical services stated a shortfall of $120 million when they did a study. Governor Walz only targeted $16 million. Is there anything different?
there is a bill moving forward for that. I am not sure that's going to go, probably. I just know that there's a shortfall for all of the ambulance services in the state. I mean, mostly the greater Minnesota. If we don't have those services, obviously that will be detrimental to a lot of people in the state. I don't know if it's going to pass. It's really up to the majority party at this point.
I would like to see the bill, if the bill would be brought forward by itself, it would pass. My concern is they're going to stick it in the middle of some really nasty bill that you have to make the decision as to whether you vote yes or no on. And it wouldn't surprise me if that's what they did, because they know the importance of it to greater Minnesota. So, and I honestly don't know what I will do in that scenario. I'm in strong support of the bill, but, you know, there's just some of these things that you just can't accept.
There are bills in the House and Senate. What is being done for community television? Because people are getting away from cable. So I assume that's kind of, in Worthington we have Channel 3, which I don't know what they have in Laverne or Fulda, but...
Yeah, we have the same thing.
Okay. Is there anything happening on that front?
I have heard from constituents, but I have not heard anything.
Yeah, it's the same here. It's an issue for the citizens, but I have not seen or heard anything coming through the legislature regarding it.
And then part two, kind of an extension, is there anything regarding compensation or additional charges or state money for streaming or other forms of communication?
Yeah.
Same
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know that it's not just with that. There's been several newspapers that have been closing also, and people are getting concerned about getting information out in their communities because of all these resources that are going away.
And people are concerned about, I think, our local newspapers because they are sort of basically, the history of the community is basically found in the issues of the newspapers. And if you lose them, you know, where does that information get recorded at the end of the day? And so, but there's a whole variety of issues as it relates to that, but I don't see anything coming through the legislature to deal with the issue at this point.
What does local government aid look like compared to the last year?
Well, there are no proposals for changes at this point, other than I'm not so sure they aren't trying to figure out a way to tie prevailing wage into local government aid, which would be a real nightmare if they do. But I haven't seen anything regarding that yet. They're trying to tie prevailing wage into everything else at this point. They were even talking about, I think in the House there is a bill to actually include it with local option sales tax bills and with tax increment financing bills. And the Senate chair does not see how that could possibly work. So I don't believe that will happen. But I have been, every time prevailing wages come up, I've been making the statement, let's go back a year ago. And I visited with the labor unions. I said, I'm not trying to get rid of prevailing wage, but you have to understand, prevailing wage does not work for our projects out here. I have had communities that have turned back $1.5 million housing grants because no developer can make it work with the prevailing wage that the Department of Labor and Industry has determined is appropriate for that community in this area. And I said, what I would like you to do is help me get the Department of Labor and Industry to come up with realistic numbers for our communities. Prevailing wage will not be an issue if the numbers that they come up with are realistic with the community in which they're used. And, oh yeah, we understand, you know, what have you, and all I've gotten is lip service so far. And so every time prevailing wage comes up in a committee on which I sit, I bring that issue up. And they are starting to get a little leery of me, but I did get approached by their lobbyist the other day. He said, I hear I owe you a meeting. I said, oh, you owe me much more than that. But I said, but I will continue to bring that issue up. And because even they are recognizing that the department wasn't. And I talked to the governor and at that time, his commissioner of Dolly, which is Department of Labor and Industry, about this issue when the governor first took over in 2019. And you see how far we've gotten. So, but anyway.
I haven't heard nothing about any changes for that.
Okay. This question, and forgive me if I don't quite read it correctly, did anything get decided in regards to nuisance inspections not being able to be completed for facilities with less than 10 people? It says this could potentially affect group home inspections, making them less regulated, I believe is what the question is.
Well, I think, here's one of the things I'm thinking it might refer to. we had a in-home daycare provider that recently quit in Rock County. And the reason that she quit was that her refrigerator, every refrigerator in an in-home daycare is supposed to have a certain temperature at which it maintains. And the inspector came during the lunch hour for the children. What happens when you're at the lunch hour for the children? You open the fridge, take things out, you close the fridge, you put the stuff back, you open the fridge, you close the door. And how many times does this probably go on during a lunch break for these young kids? The inspector came, took the temperature reading during that time period, and it was like 2 degrees off. And she got a write-up for it. And she said, if this is what we're coming to, I've done. She got a job. She gave her parents 3 weeks' notice, and there's another daycare provider that has now bit the dust. These are the type of nuisance inspections I am assuming, and these things exist, quite frankly, whether it's in home, whether it's a center or what have you. Where's the common sense out there? You know, that's the thing we have to ask ourselves, or that's the thing agencies have to ask themselves. You know, it's right at this point, until there's a change in administration and attitude within agencies, I don't know what else can be done.
Unfortunately, this government just keeps wanting to overregulate us, and they're pushing small businesses out of the communities, and that's not good for any Minnesota, because they have all these programs that are created and funded by your tax dollars, and the less tax dollars they bring in, the less those programs are going to work, and it's going to continue to push people out of the state. And I hear that a lot. I hear, well, I'm looking at land in South Dakota. Well, I'm moving back to Iowa. Well, we want to keep Minnesotans in Minnesota. And it's not good what is going on.
I just want to comment on that's a wonderful comment. As a bank that's lifeblood is to finance small business, we see every week where small business is getting piled on with regulatory requirements or mandates, as we call them. It's suffocating our small businesses. And when they have options like going across the border to Iowa or go across the border to South Dakota, we see that happening. And not only does that hurt us as a business, but our communities are losing small businesses due to this pile-on of regulations. And we seem to have a governor that enjoys modeling California right now. And what do you read about California? Those small businesses are vacating. So we're down this slippery slope that's really going to get ugly soon.
Well, and they don't want they also don't want the small businesses passing on fees. And they want your business to list everything and every fee that you ever, or your small businesses, but they just pass that 50-cent delivery fee, but you don't have to list that fee, but you have to make sure you tell us everything that you're charging us. And it's just, and they want small businesses to stop charging these fees, and I'm like, well, the small businesses are charging these fees because it keeps getting piled on to everything that they're doing, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah, and the state just doesn't want people to know who's responsible for that fee, which is them.
Can't wait to hear the answers to this one. How is the new Capitol building project coming along? Has the cost projection changed, and what is the current cost projection?
The current cost projected is $720 million. 500 of that is just everything, and then the other 200 and some million is interest charges, and that's the floor. There's a giant hole when you look out the window now, and they did try, some of the Republicans did try to kind of meet with them and say, we need to put the brakes on this and really look at what the costs are, and they're like, it's too late, it's already going, we can't stop it.
Of course, when they're spending $2.5 million for just your office.
Yeah, well, that's, and why do we need this? We're a part-time legislator. We're there for 5 months. There's absolutely no reason for this spending. And unfortunately, there is a bill moving forward for a full-time legislator. and it's going to probably be a vote on the ballot this year. And it's not going to be a standalone vote. So people might not even realize what they're voting for if they say, yeah, that sounds good.
So I'm going to bite on that. A full-time legislator, which means you would be in St. Paul 12 months out of the year? Or?
Well, they didn't really say. They removed the 120 days, and yeah, it's open then. But that's what that's what is moving forward right now to get on the ballot, and that is moving through committees, so.
Hey, Ryan,
Yes.
you said there was $720 million for this capital expansion of buildings, but $220 million of it is on interest on the loan of $500 million?
Mm-hmm.
I was First State Bank to get that loan.
And the other issue is, here we are spending this kind of money for a new office building. And I don't disagree that the state office building, in which the House is currently located, probably needs to be updated in terms of technology and what have you. But Centennial Office Building, half empty. The building where the Department of Revenue is located is about half empty. Every office, the DOT building, half empty. When are we going to start consolidating these offices and putting the others back on the open market? Basically, half of our staff works from home these days at any given time. I may have mentioned this last year. I don't know if I did or not, but I had a issue with the MPCA, and I made the statement to the commissioner, it's time that you got your people's butts back in their seats. And she said, well, I have half of them here at any given time. I said, well, then you got the wrong half because they're not getting their work done. But that is the way it is right now. Quite frankly, we're seeing that in private business. Both of my kids work in the metro area, are both now full-time from home. And it's creating all kinds of challenges in the workforce. Those of you who are bosses or who have been bosses understand that there are individuals, you had employees who could handle that, who were disciplined enough to be able to handle that. And then there are those who cannot. And
Now
how
they're
do you
just
deal
going to be
with
gambling on their phones.
So they'll be gambling on their phones. I'll make sure and visit with your boss about that issue. But the reality of it is that there's a whole workplace change happening right now, and I don't think it's anything that any of us, whether we're in the legislature or whether we're in business, are going to be able to change, because it's there right now. And there are people that have to be at their spot to get their job done, and there are those that don't. But we're spending $720 million, and you know that the cost will become more. I think it's now they put in it's $8 million to redo the tunnel from the office building to the Capitol. And that wasn't part of the original project, so that's an add-on.
And we got told that the reason it was another in the Capital Investments Committee is that the reason it's not included in the project is because it's on the other side of the street. And it's not going to be fixing the tunnel, even though it's closed. It's going to be putting another little knockout on the side. So there's just going to be a little separate tunnel for the ADA compliant part of it.
Oh, so not even fixing the existing tunnel?
I don't think that's included. That's just adding, like in a little elevator, and then it's going to be a side chute, and then back around. Just because when you leave the Capitol, it is very steep. It is not ADA compliant. Mm-hmm. And former Representative Rod Hamilton testified, because he went from walking to using a walker to his wheelchair, and it is difficult. They said there was no other, that was the best plan that they could do, was to add a second little tunnel there.
And if you go down the wrong tunnel, does it spit you out somehow and chuck you across the street?
No, I don't think so, but it's just, it seemed like somebody said, well, could you put a moving sidewalk in there? And they're like, no, we can't do that. And I don't know, you'd think they'd be able to fill that in somehow and make it easier for everyone, but apparently that's not what they are telling us.
I would say they're limited at what they can do with the existing tunnel because it isn't that wide,
No, it's not very wide.
you know, and if there's
Not
two-way.
compared to the Senate one.
If there's two-way if there's two-way traffic there, you know, if you have motorized vehicles, you know, it's a challenge, quite frankly. And so I understand that part of it. But I just look at the space and I asked one of the commissioners one day, I said, so how many of your people are actually on duty at any time in the building? And he looked at me, he said, you know, I don't even know. You know, and so, yeah, I would hate to be the manager of some of that, to be honest with you, but.
I have no more questions up here. Marge had said, I don't know if you said this in your earlier remarks, you may have, but she told me she had to leave at 9 o'clock.
Yeah, I have to be in Martin County, so I'm heading that way.
So I think what we'll probably do, I'm sure, well, would you like to offer any additional remarks before you hit the road?
Sure. Just thanks again, everybody, for being here today. Knowledge is key, and the more you know. And if you don't like something, contact your legislators. And it doesn't have to be me. I mean, if you know it's something I'm going to vote with you on, or you think that I agree with you on, then I encourage you to contact the Democrat legislators, because they need to hear from you too. And the more they hear, the better, because the more information that gets out there is helpful for all of Minnesota. So thank you again for being here today, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming. I don't know if anyone has any more questions. I've gotten all of them I've had. Do you want to, I'll leave it in your court, Bill, since you're going to be the only one left. Do you want to just kind of visit with people, or do you want to continue?
However, whatever people want to do is fine with me. And so, and again, I thank everyone also for coming today, and we'll be glad to stick around and visit with you about whatever you wish. So.
Very good. So thank you, everybody, for coming, and look out further down the road. We'll be having some more governmental affairs sponsored forums as we get into election season. Thank you very much for coming.